Hi guys, welcome back. I know that I have been pretty inactive lately, except for the whole drawing thing, which is my way of just coping with everything that's happening with me right now, which I'll go into in a little bit. But also, for those of you who are expecting a funny, light, positive video, it is going to be a positive video, but it's not going to be a funny one. So if that's not your thing, if you're not here for that today, please feel free to, click off and join me another time. But, sometimes life throws you curveballs and you have serious things to discuss, and that's what I want to do today. It was going to be one of two things, and both of those things are pretty serious to me. So that's what we're doing today. The little ounce of positivity that I can give you is that I guess I can start showing fan art now. And one of my good friends, Philip, actually drew me with charcoal. I'll splice that in at some point in this video. So that you guys can admire his work. I thought it was pretty nice. But that's really the only, happy, joyful thing that I can say for now. So what's gone on with me in the last week, or last 2 weeks, I should say. I've had a couple of health complications, nothing serious, I'm not dying. Had to go to A&E, I had to go to my GP, I had to, take more than a few days of just resting and, trying not to die from the pain. And, I'll cover that. I think that was one of the options. I was going to talk about my relationship with my own health, and how that kind of triggers me into a state of depression / PTSD. So I think I'll put a pin in that for another time, for those of you who are, absolutely riveted by that conversation. But the other thing that sort of came to my understanding is that I have a grandfather in this country who sadly is dying. He's on his way out, and he has lived a very full life. I believe he's in his 90s. In those days, they didn't really count their age. Pretty sure on his passport, his birthday is the 1st of January. But he's in his 80s, 90s. He's pushing on in years, is what I'm saying. And he's in hospital right now. He has dementia, he has Alzheimer's. From what the nurses have told me, he has lost his ability or his will to speak, and kind of only looks at you. And, it's difficult for me to talk about this without getting emotional, so it is going to be one of those videos if you're going to stick around. I don't know how emotional, but I'm going to try and hold it together so that this video can be at least a little bit cohesive. And I wanted to talk about my grandfather and, kind of tribute this to him, because he's kind of an amazing guy. We're all human. He's had his ups and downs in life, but I wanted to tribute this to him. Just talk about him and how I remember him. But also talk about the difficulty of a loved one dying while you are no longer part of an extended family. I would not even know that he was dying if one of my cousins, who I keep in contact with, but no one really knows that I keep in contact with her, hadn't told me. She gave me more or less all the information I needed to find him, which hospital he's at, so that I could speak to the nurses and the sisters that are working there. Oh my God. But it's been made very difficult, is all I'm going to say. A few family members have offered to sort of allow me to visit with them, but I don't want to create a scene, you know, in the middle of a hospital. And if there's anyone in this world who's going to do that, it's members of my family. Not all of them, but members of my family would create a scene in a hospital, especially if my father was there. My father is a diva. He will make a scene literally fucking anywhere, you know, and other members of my family. So I don't want to, you know, go with family members and either they make a scene or other family members also be there and then them make a scene, not only in the hospital but also right by, you know, the bed of a man who doesn't remember anyone or anything around him. I don't want to do that. So it's been a case of like navigating and negotiating different times to go like and see him in secret, or you know, just constantly call the hospital ward to find out how he's doing, but they can't reveal too much because of, you know, GDPR and data protection and all of that. It's been a lot, is what I'm saying. Like, I feel like most people, no matter the relationship with their family, like their whole family, if someone is dying, they can put all the shit aside just to honor that dying person, just to give them some space and some respect. Like, there's a boundary there, but that does not exist very clearly with my family. You know, I saw it around the time that my mother was passing away, and the amount of scenes that I had to deal with then was ridiculous. Like, I was in such a feral state because I just wanted to accept the fact that my mother had passed away, you know? But I couldn't, because of all the people, like, throwing their shit everywhere, throwing blame, arguing, you know, trying to sue the NHS or whatever the fuck. Like, there is no peace even when someone is dying, and I don't want to create a battlefield in a hospital. So I have to navigate and, you know, go behind my entire family's back to go and see my grandfather. And initially it was really difficult to, you know, find a time and really figure out, like, when everyone was there. I got advice from a couple of close ex-Muslim friends. Give me one second. Sorry, I just had to blow my nose. It was getting out of control. So I asked for some advice from some close ex-Muslim friends that I've made over the last few months. And a lot of people were like, oh, just go in secret, just go by yourself, call the hospital, tell them you have a, you know, very specific circumstance. And I tried doing that, and they can't really they can't really do much about that. You can't visit out of hours, and because it's like, I don't know, to be honest, but they couldn't really make like a special circumstance for me. Marwa Mimsy Vids actually called the hospital on my behalf to find out more information, which was really lovely, and you should know that she is just like the nicest person alive. But yeah, I got as much information from her, and then my cousin sort of contacted me back like a few more hours later after I had called the hospital, and Marwa had spoken to the hospital for me after I had spoken to the hospital. And my cousin had told me that you should aim for Jummah prayers, which is the Friday prayers, which typically all the men have to go to. And I think that that is probably the best possible time that I can go, because it will be the most likely that no one will be in that room, but still I won't know. So I have a game plan. I possibly will go this week to see him. I don't know if I'm going to leave any breadcrumbs, or I just want to go in, I want to see him, and then I want to leave, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to see him again, if I'm going to be able to go to the funeral, like, I don't know. And I feel like not seeing him before he passes away is something I'm going to regret. And it's something I need to do, so I'm going to do it. And the hospital did reassure me, or the people, the receptionists, they were really helpful in saying that you can always call to, check if anyone's there. So I'll have to, get ready on Friday to go see him, and then also call to see if anyone's in the visitation area to see him. But yeah, that's my situation right now. And I'm not in the mood to get in petty arguments about stupid shit that doesn't matter. It's one of the reasons why I've just, kind of been in my feelings, doing more creative things, just focusing on myself, drawing. I need a full time out from people and their shit. I can't do it right now. So sorry if that's off-putting for some of you, and you depend on my content on Twitter. I can't be a sass queen under these conditions. So I'm just, trying to plan that out and make sure that I can go see him. And it's going to be difficult, and it's potentially going to be very dramatic, because I know my family, and if I do run into them, it's going to be a whole thing, and I know it's going to be a whole thing, but it's something that I'm going to have to, knuckle up for. I'm going to have to suck it up and just go see my granddad. But aside from just sitting here and crying about the fact that he is probably gonna die very soon, I wanted to talk about who my granddad is, and who he was, and what he would fondly remember before everything just sort of disappeared from his mind. My grandfather was a policeman in Bangladesh, who was against the Bangladeshi independence, and he led a lot of protests. I'm not entirely sure the nature of these protests, if they were violent or non-violent, against the independence, which is why he had to seek asylum first in Pakistan and then in the UK. So he was actually a fugitive from Bangladesh. He essentially he was he was chased out of the country, which is how he received asylum in the UK. And, you know, he was very political throughout his, you know, life. He was very into Middle Eastern politics. He really, really idolized Ayatollah Khomeini. I don't know why, he just did. He actually named one of my uncles after Yasser Arafat, even though, you know, I'm not condoning any of this, I'm just telling you who my grandfather was. So he remained pretty political, and I think a lot of like South Asian men tend to be very interested, even just sort of in the skimming kind of Cliff Notes kind of way, interested in politics. So he was very invested in it. He loved, you know, his favorite thing to do was just watch the news and smoke. And yeah, I guess that would be his legacy, is that he was a fugitive from his own country because he didn't want independence in his country. I mean, I don't know how to paint that in like a positive way, but that was his life. You know, he was a father of, in total, 10 children, but 3 of them passed away in childhood. So, you know, 3 or 4, 4 of them passed away. Yeah, 4 of them passed away, sorry. He never knew his father. His mother passed away when he was a child, I think, and he has 1 half sister. And that's pretty much as I know about him. But he would talk about the old days a lot when I was really young, and he had a lot of friends in London. And my aunts, when they came here, I have 2 aunts on that side of the family, they were not very religious. I have a feeling that my granddad wanted the family to be pretty modern, not extremely modern, because he still pushed my aunts to get married at a very young age, but I think he wanted them to be modern because they didn't really wear hijabs. It wasn't, I also don't think it was a thing. According to my aunt, who is, you know, very disappointed that I no longer cover, she would wear jeans size 10, from what she would say, and she had long, you know, dyed hair, which she would perm and get in trouble for from my grandma. And, you know, all sorts. But yeah, that, you know, was life. They lived in Chalk Hill for a while before moving. They had like my childhood house. I lived in my grandmother's house until I was about 10, I think. And that house will always be, you know, even just passing by it just brings back so many memories, because I grew up in that house. You know, it was a very big house. It was, I think it was 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, 1 living room, 2 bathrooms, a very small kitchen and a dining room. And 4 of my uncles shared 1 room at one point. My mother, my father, and my brother shared 1 room at another point. And I would run around the house with my cousin, who was the same age as me, and we would raise hell in that house. It was just a house full of people all the time. And my granddad, the 2 things that I remember about him from my childhood was that I remember a number of things about him. He always loved pita bread. He loved pita bread. It was the thing that he would eat all the time, and I would be so jealous because my mum would shove rice down my throat, and I hated rice at that point in my life. I was a very difficult child when it came to eating. I know, it's very, you know, hard to believe, but when I was a child, I would give my mom hell. Like, I would not eat. I would take hours to eat. So when my granddad would see that, he would give me pieces of his naan bread, and I would eat that. And he would have like fish, and he loved this vegetable that I fucking hated. It was in Bangladesh we call it like khorola. I don't know what it is in English, but it's a very bitter tasting vegetable. But apparently it was supposed to be really good for you, which was why my granddad had it. Sorry. Also, he was a very heavy smoker. He used to smoke one after the other. I'm pretty sure at one point he was just restricted to smoking in his room, and on the ceiling there was like a black patch because he used to sit there and smoke all the time. And I would just, like, when I was really little, I would just sneak into his room and I would like sit on his lap and play with the smoke, and we would just be sitting there doing nothing. He would smoke and I would just be like, you know, it's smoke. And to this day, like, smoke is still a very nostalgic smell, even though it probably is bad for you. It's bad for me to think of it that way, but it's a very nostalgic smell for me because my granddad used to smoke a lot and I spent a lot of time around that. Every day after school, he would take me to the corner shop. Like, back then there were a lot more newsagents and stuff like that, and he would take me to the corner shop and he would get like produce and stuff for the house, and he would buy me sweets, candy, crisps, anything I wanted that day. Like, every single day he would buy me like confectionery and say like snacks every single day. And he knew also like what my favorite things were. Like, he knew that I think at that time they had, I think they were called Space Raiders or something. They were like 10p or even less at that time. They were just like these really sour crisps or chips made from corn. And I would love having those. Cheetos were a thing back then in the UK. And Cheetos had like a brand deal with Pokemon or something, and they used to have these little discs with different Pokemon on them, and I was crazy into Pokemon. So he would always buy me those. And in terms of sweets, like literally anything, like anything that wasn't like Haribo, because Haribo was like the haram brand back then. It always had gelatin in it. He would buy me, but he still didn't give a fuck. He would still buy me gelatin stuff, and then my mum would throw it away because she would be like, this has gelatin in it, she can't have it. And then, I don't know, like, it was either he could never remember, or he would never read the packets, or he just didn't give a fuck, like he didn't care. But he would always buy me sweets, and it was always a point of issue for my brother because he had so many cavities from them, because he would never brush his teeth, and I always used to brush my teeth, so I never got any cavities. I do now, which is bizarre, but I never got any cavities back then, even though I would have sweets like non-stop because my granddad would constantly buy them for me. And you know, just every single day, every time he went out, and he was like really active. He would go out every single fucking day, even if it was just to the newsagents to get me sweets and then come back. And he would go see his friends like across London, and back then the public transport and stuff wasn't as good as it is now. But he would do that, and like I remember that so like vividly. Every time that he would pick me up, or he'd be like, let's go outside, like he was so into that. Like, I don't know if someone was pushing him, like I don't know, I was a kid, but he would take me out all the time just to get sweets. And it's one of the fonder things that I remember of him, now that he clearly has no recollection of that. Like, a few years back when, you know, all the drama with me and my dad was going on, and, you know, I was leaving the house and things. At that time, in 2015-ish, like between 2014 and 2015, he could not recognize any of my other cousins. He could only recognize me. He only knew who I was out of my cousins. And I'm not the oldest cousin on that side. From what I could recall, I was the only one that he could recognize, and that really, in a way, it was like, oh, he loves me the most. And in another way, I was like, oh, damn, that's sad. Like like none of my other cousins will really get to know my granddad the way that I knew him, you know, for the man that he used to be. And like, I remember the days where he was like a little child. He would, like, this was when his health started failing him, and he had to follow a very regimented, I'm sorry, I'm getting like emotional again. He had to follow a very regimented diet, so he couldn't have sugar anymore, and he also couldn't smoke anymore. They had cut him off cold turkey because he was just like, he would not follow the regimen. He was well past it at that point. But he would behave like a complete child. He would go behind my grandma's back, who was the only one that was like monitoring him. He would like watch for her to leave like the kitchen, and even if I was in there or if someone else was in there, he would just go in and lick his finger and stick his finger in like a pot of sugar and then just like eat the sugar from his finger. And then he would realize that there were other people in the kitchen, and he would just be like, don't tell your grandma. It's like, you're not supposed to be doing that. And he would just behave like a child. And there was at one point, I don't know if it was because he forgot he wasn't allowed to smoke or if he was just being exceptionally creative. There was one point where he would like put like that instant coffee beans inside those like roll up sheets of like cigarette stuff, the ones that you roll up, because he used to roll his own cigarettes as well. So he used to put coffee like the instant coffee like pieces in there, and he would try to smoke that. And it's like, I don't know if that was all part of it or if he was genuinely just like, let me try this shit and see if it works, you know? I think in the last 10 or so years, he just stopped giving a fuck, you know? And now he's gotten to a point where he's like in the last year or so, he's gotten to a point where he's actually started fully losing his memory. Even of the stuff that, from like way back, even stuff that he used to talk about with me when I was still living with my family, you know, 2012, 2013, when he would talk about the old days, when he was a policeman, he would still be able to talk about that. I think at this point, he's completely forgotten all of that. I mean, he's still conscious. He doesn't really speak, from what I've been told by the nurses, but he's he just looks around. He hasn't been really talking to anyone, which is odd for him, because when I was younger, he did like talking, especially about the old days. And he was a storyteller as well. I mean, and also I think the other thing is, and why I feel quite compelled to go and see him, I think he was the only family member, like of the older generation, who did not give me shit for reporting my dad. And I don't know if that's because he wasn't aware of what was going on, or if it was because he genuinely just understood. But either or, it doesn't matter. He was the only one who did not give me shit for doing something that was really difficult for me to do. Like, maybe not physically difficult, but emotionally just really, really difficult for me to do. And he was the only one from like my dad's generation up Like, from that generation up, he was the only one. I could go on for days about people in my family who mistreated me. But my grandfather was not one of them. Whether or not he was aware, my grandfather was not one of them. So I owe it to him to go see him one last time. So I'm gonna do that. And I'm sorry for crying so much. It's really difficult. It's really, really difficult for me to process all of it on top of all the hoops that I'm gonna have to jump through to do this, you know? But yeah, thank you for sitting through this if you did that. If you if you want to, send your prayers, your positive energy, whatever you want. I believe it's all positive energy. So, send it all in his direction. I just hope his passing is easy. And yeah. And I hope you will understand my inactivity. It's just been a really hard few weeks for me to wrap my head around everything. But yeah, I'll see you soon. Hopefully with a happier subject matter or something that's a bit more escapist than this. But thank you, and I will see you in the next one.